But just on that historicity point, Maurice Bucquois, it's about 70 years ago that he engaged in this study. He said, well, Jewish history contradicts what the Quran is saying about Haman and this tower building. Let's look at Egyptology. Let's look at Egyptian history. Because the French and the Germans at the late part of the 1800s had already started translating or getting into Egyptian hieroglyphics and reformulating the language to try to translate some of the ancient Egyptian texts. Egyptology was a big deal in the early 1900s even. So he travels to speak to some of these Egyptologists, says to them the Quran has this name, Haman, as a minister working for the historical pharaoh at the time of Moses, that specific pharaoh. Egyptologists tell him, and this is actually articulated in his book, The Bible, Quran, and Science, that there's no way this man could have known that name, and it's not even going to be there because that language, the Egyptian hieroglyphic language, was already dead for a couple of thousand years. Nobody knew that language. After translation, he goes to Austria and finds out there's actually a list of people that worked in the court of Pharaoh. They find Haman as the chief architect. That's actually found in Egyptology, a name mentioned in the Quran.
And it took more than 2 million blocks of stone, averaging 2.5 tons, to build the pyramid. We know where the construction workers lived and what they ate. We even know the name of the architect who designed it, Hemienu. That's him there, with rolls of fat to show he's prosperous.
Now, when I got into Arabic studies, and I started diving into this question of what makes the Quran miraculous, I started discovering things that literally overpowered me, and I'm still a student of them. I actually teach a seminar that's traveling the country called Divine Speech. And the entire intent of the seminar is to expose the literary marvel of the Quran to an English-speaking audience without resorting to Arabic. That's the seminar. Now, just one example. The Quran, Muslims believe, is a spoken word, it's not written. We also believe that Muhammad didn't have the ability to write. We also know that when he would recite the Quran, there would be dozens of followers and they would immediately memorize what he said and it would just spread. So there's no editorial process. You can't go back on what you recited. It's gone, it's out there now, you can't take it back. It's kind of like sending an email nowadays, right? Now, just as an example, one phrase in the Quran that's part of a large discussion is the phrase وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. In Arabic it says وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, which means, and declare the greatness only of your Lord. Now recall I said something about a fusion of style and content. The content is beautiful, and it's part of a passage in which the signs of the Lord have been mentioned, the struggle has been mentioned, and then the messenger is being told, declare the greatness only of your Lord. What's interesting is the phrase وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ is a palindrome. In other words, it spells backwards and forwards the same way. So the Quran is declaring the greatness of the Lord in a way, in its spelling form, and there's multiple instances in the spoken Quran, that it's actually a linguistic palindrome. Now, when you want to generate a palindrome in English, like race car, or Bob, or dad, or something like that, small one-syllable ones are easy to generate. Maybe a big word is a little harder, but a sentence, it would take you some time to sit down with words that are spelled backwards and forwards and come up with something that, and then even if you do that, your concern isn't your content. What's your concern? The spelling. So the spelling is actually dictating your content. Here you have multiple instances in the Quran where the content hasn't been altered. The content is continued, it flows with the passage, and yet the spelling structure is, it's a palindrome. It's symmetrical, backwards and forwards the same way. And this is not one, these are multiple instances in the Quran. And this is one area of the many areas of the linguistic marvel of the Quran.
فأغشيناهم